and welcome to the next episode of Elevate. We're coming live from Soto in Seattle, Washington, from this beautiful Kasama space. Our first guest is Hyobin Sung. She is an entrepreneur and community builder. Hyobin, thank you so much for coming today. It's so great to have you here.
Rachel, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to speak with you today and talk about my journey in entrepreneurship as well as business. And I am just so grateful to participate in this Elevate series. So thank you for having me.
You have very impressive multiple career pivot points I've ever seen. How did it all start?
Well, thank you. I have my parents to thank because I think my career actually began in their dry cleaners as immigrants to the US from South Korea. That's really where I learned how to think about business operations, and incorporating the community for that success. From that point on, I became very involved in the local community and politics. So I spent, I would say, pretty much from high school into college, being involved in politics and advocacy work in the DC area. And I started post-college working with nonprofits as well as the US Congress, right in between college as well as outside. From that point, I realized I was really curious about the world and I wanted to see a developing nation in action. So I packed up my suitcases and went to China, and I spent about 7 years living and building businesses in China as a young person. What started out as an interest in international development sort of evolved into realizing that I actually have a lot of love and passion for businesses and solving problems and dealing with areas that I was dissatisfied with. So I made a little pivot from my focus being on international development into startup and entrepreneurship, and was able to found my first company in China as a foreign business owner. And that really allowed me to delve into the community work amongst other business creatives as well as problem solvers. So that's really where my, I would say, career began to become more dynamic, and I was able to incorporate my love for business and incorporating community into that work.
Wow. You know, I could relate to that a lot, especially when you said you just packed up and left to go China.
Yes.
That's how I came to US, actually, to Canada.
Right.
When I was 19, 18. I was just packed up. I have to experience this myself.
Yes.
And I need to learn the language. That's the only way to learn the language.
Yes.
Did you know how to speak Chinese before you went to China?
Oh my goodness, no, not at all. And what made it more challenging was the fact that I am also Asian and I look Chinese. So it really was confusing for the local, Chinese friends that I met and just random strangers, even my taxi drivers, because I would get in and I would just fumble my way through navigating the city. And that became such a barrier. But you know what motivated me to actually learn Chinese was opening up my own business and opening up my shop every day and having to interact with my customers and seeing the frustrations and also their grace in trying to communicate with me so they can interact with the business that I created really, really motivated me to, I gotta learn this language and I have to meet them where they are. So that's honestly how I picked up the spoken Chinese, Mandarin.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine running a business, not knowing the language fully.
Right.
But you did it, and you also built a women business group.
Yes.
There.
I did.
How did you do that?
So what I quickly learned trying to start a business from the ground up is that you frankly actually need a lot of resources and tools and networks to make it happen. In the beginning, I just told myself, and I'm sure a lot of people tell themselves, I can handle this, right? And that really does stem from maybe ignorance of what that challenge might be, but also fear, right? Of being found out that you don't know what you're doing. That really, was the first moment in my business journey where I realized I'm not going to do this alone. I can't do it alone, and I don't have to do it alone. So that's when I started to, participate in business communities. So I started participating and showing up for those events. I just didn't see a lot of, fellow women entrepreneurs and experts out there participating. So I said, you know what, I need to create a space where more people can come and participate and exchange ideas and take ideas into reality. So that's where I went out into the community, found 2 other women business owners at the time to say, hey, I have content ideas. I know you just started a meetup group. Why don't we combine and just produce a 1-year worth of workshops that focused on business topics and relevant tools that were out there, one of which was WeChat.
Wow.
Yeah.
What resonated the most is the combining the forces together, and you can't do business alone. How was the reaction when 2 of you started, okay, we're gonna do this workshop, we're gonna combine our forces together? What was the reaction? Did you guys, how did it kind of explode? And tell me more about that.
Yes, so the very first iteration was a meetup for women professionals, which I was not a part of. And I think they ended up getting about 60 community members coming out. So our very first workshop, I think, ended up having a little over 80 women who signed up of international women in business. And so our membership really went from about 80 to 500 between year 1 and year 2.
Wow.
And we were able to sustain that momentum pretty much up until I came back to the US, and I believe they're still continuing on that journey.
Wow, that is a great legacy that you can say, well, I did that. Right? That's a good thing on your resume. So then what was the motivation to come to US? So that is your next pivot point, right?
I spent about, in total, 7 years in China, combining my entrepreneurship work and community work. And that was my entire 20s. Toward the end of my time there, I came to really recognize that, wow, I really love doing this work. I love business, and that's rooted in community. But the question really was, can I sustain this here as a foreigner and build on this momentum to scale it in a way that I was wanting to and desiring to? And pretty much at the end of the day, the answer was probably not. So a very difficult decision that after about 7 years, that it was time to reintegrate myself back into America.
That takes courage to me to make that.
It was hard. And that's where I met you.
So let's talk about from China to Seattle, and what were you doing in Seattle?
For us, Seattle was supposed to be just our landing pad with our 4 suitcases and 2 dogs. And we were met with the realities of pivoting, and not just pivoting within the same market, but international pivots. It was really difficult because people that we would, send our resumes or cold call, they would look at what we said we did, and a lot of them just couldn't really understand what it meant, right? So that was our biggest challenge.
So that's shocking to me that your resume didn't translate here, because I would think that the Seattle Starbucks community, your resume would translate straight to this. How did you overcome that challenge?
I frankly couldn't figure out how to tell my story. And so I had to try different methods, right? So one of those included obviously sending over resumes, cold calling, sending emails, where I try to highlight in bullet points of what I had done. And that actually didn't yield me a lot of results. What did yield a lot of tangible results was when I showed up in person to these events and activities and networking spaces and connect in real life, which is what I did with you, was when I became credible. So I think it was a combination of trying different methods and speaking the language in the US market that I frankly was not well versed in, because I was so rooted in the startup language of a global economy that was China, which is the market that I was coming back from.
I see. Yeah, I think there's a translation of the business, even just what China was focusing on. Probably in the U.S. market, probably was different.
Yes.
So what did you end up doing in Seattle? What was the job? What was the role, or what did you do in Seattle?
Yes. So I made a big pivot again in my career to go from being my own, right, boss, to working for a company, and this company happened to be in the nonprofit sector. I was able to find a role in a more traditional learning and development space, and I still felt like that opportunity was perfect for me, that I could combine my entrepreneurial skills and community building focused on people to help an organization build their people department, their people pillar. So I spent about 2 years building out the learning and development department of a statewide nonprofit, and was able to exercise, right, my business skills, my entrepreneurial ways of solving problems. But after those 2 years, I recognized that it wasn't enough for me, and I still needed to be building something from the ground up. But what that opportunity solidified for me is that, yes, I do want to focus on people and helping businesses, right, create their people operations.
People operations. So the nonprofit learning and development in Seattle was internally, like the employees and
Yes.
their development within the company,
Yes.
so their career development,
Right,
and their
training, leadership development, right.
Great. So then you were able to, from your business experience and from your entrepreneur experience, then you were able to create a learning path, sort of in a way, for the organizations.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Wow, that's quite the pivot from being a business owner in China of a luxury, so secondhand luxury brand,
Right.
to that.
Yes. So actually, it wasn't such a dramatic transition, because essentially the business I had in China was a social impact luxury consignment business, which is very common in the US market, but it was the very first retail shop that opened up in a city, and that city was of 12 million population. Context here. So why it wasn't so different was because that business concept was so new in that market, I needed to flex community organizing, community workshops, and public education and awareness campaigns for the consumers to understand what it meant to consign, reuse, right? Repurpose their items. So to me, when I came back to the US, I was like, okay, what I need to figure out is how do I continue working in business and with people?
Now I can see some of the thread, even though you were making some pivot points, there's always kind of common thread that you were carrying through, which was community building, people focus. So
Yes.
then so let's talk about what are you doing now?
Yeah. So right now, I work in the innovation department of Stanley Black & Decker. So now I'm in the corporate space. And the work that I do in that innovation unit, we are called the SpT&x department, is working on their talent solutions pillar, where I get to actually now envision new products and services that elevate, right, the voices of the workforce, so people once again, and particularly focusing on new innovations that address how we will work in the future, right? So once again, I was able to find that transition point that got me closer to the work that I really wanted to be doing, that also utilized my experience.
Yeah.
In variety of spaces that I was in.
I think because of that variety of experiences is how and why you are able to do this job well. What would be the example of the work that you're doing currently?
Yes, that's a great question. So right now, through the pandemic, we are hearing this phrase called the Great Resignation, right? If you delve into the data and more nuanced examples of where these resignations are happening, they're not necessarily with office workers, right? People who have corporate jobs, people who have stable office work that now can work from home. So right now, I'm trying to work with the team on envisioning something similar to, like LinkedIn or different apps that match, right, gig work to workers out there that caters to folks who work in the trades. So folks who don't work in an office environment but are just as skilled, just as capable, if not more, and are able to find meaningful, right, jobs, potentially career pathways. So we're trying to, think of different products out there as well as services that cater to that group of workers, which are the majority of the world, actually.
Wow. Yeah, wow, that's fascinating. That's really cool.
Yes, it's very exciting.
Yeah, it is really exciting because then you're pulling really from like completely different segments of people with skills, workforce who might have been neglected in the past for lots of reasons. Then now with the Great Resignation, so there's new opportunities and there's new workforce that are being utilized and being tapped into.
Yes, and it actually makes a lot of sense for me. And I mentioned the dry cleaning being my first workplace, but being an immigrant, what you recognize is the creativity and the nimbleness of all people, right? You make things from nothing, or you make some things happen. You solve problems by utilizing what you have. So that's essentially what I'm trying to do, is to open up more spaces for different voices of workers, right? Other professionals who may not come from a 4-year college degrees, who may not, have worked within the corporate sector, but are just as creative, right? Are very resourceful and are incredible problem solvers. And I got to experience that as a child, but also living in China, being in that growing economy, in that startup space. I saw people with incredible ideas, and it did not matter what kind of education they had. It did not matter, right, who they knew, as long as they had the idea and were able to connect the resources and the tools. So essentially, my mission in life is to be that facilitator, right? That connects people to tools and resources to take their ideas into businesses or, right, solutions, or into their careers. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to find this new opportunity where I could get closer to truly who I am and the experiences that I bring in coming up with tangible products and services. So that's the work I want to be doing, is let's create more frameworks then that would allow people to more readily articulate their life stories, which is exciting and dynamic, and not have to try and fit into this mold of a one-pager resume or their 60-second elevator pitch. And I say that as a person who have struggled my whole life to pitch myself in 60 seconds. It's really difficult.
Yeah. So what would be the takeaways you can tell our audience from all your stories and your journeys we shared today?
Yeah, that's a great question. The very first takeaway is to really learn who you are and know yourself, especially your mission and vision in your life. I think it's worth it to do like an annual exercise, writing out 1 to 2, right, mission statements for yourself. So that's my first takeaway. The second takeaway is to come up with your own cues in deciding when you go, stop, pivot, or wait out an opportunity or a decision. Utilizing that framework was extremely helpful and important for me when I built my first business, and also in collaborating with other partners in different projects and work that I did. And the final takeaway here is to figure out a way to become okay, right? And accepting that incremental changes in your life is the way to go, instead of trying to change something overnight or giving up just because you didn't meet one right? One of your goalposts. I struggled a lot because I would start something, and if I didn't meet one of those posts, didn't get there, I would say, okay, screw this. I don't have what it takes. But frankly, it's not like that. You have to build in that daily habit. So I would say to be graceful to yourself and be incremental in the changes that you want to see in yourself as well as in the work that you do.
I love that. I love all 3 points, but especially the last one.
Yes.
Be okay with incremental changes. That just speaks to me a lot. How can anyone who wants to talk to you more reach out to you?
Good question. So if you're an entrepreneur and a community builder that works on workforce development and future of work, I definitely want to connect with you. So visit hyobinsung.com. That's my name spelled out.com, or by reaching out to me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, Hyobin. It's such a pleasure to have you, and I just can't wait to hear how your journey unfolds from here on. And we'll stay in touch, and then you keep me posted.
Yes, thank you so much. Today was so fun, and I am so excited for the Elevate series one more time. I'm going to be watching. I will become a subscriber, so subscribe to this channel. Yay! Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for watching this episode with Hyobin. We will be coming back with more episodes like this next time. And thanks for watching. See you next time.